What if I told you it's not your looks, your money, or your status that she remembers years later, but one subtle thing you did that most men don't even realize matters? Most men believe that if they say the right things, explain themselves clearly, or logically prove their value, they'll be remembered. But human connection doesn't work that way. Logic may convince the mind in the moment, but emotion is what anchors an experience in memory. It's the difference between being understood and being felt. Think about the people you remember most in your own life. It's rarely because of what they told you step by step. It's because of how they made you feel in a specific moment: calm, excited, safe, challenged, or deeply seen. That emotional imprint becomes attached to them, almost like a signature they leave behind. When a man focuses only on logic, he often sounds rehearsed or predictable. He explains too much, justifies his actions, or tries to control the outcome of the interaction. But instead of creating connection, this creates distance. It turns the interaction into something intellectual rather than experiential. On the other hand, when emotion is present, genuine laughter, a calm and grounded tone, subtle intensity, or even playful unpredictability, it creates a feeling that can't be easily replicated. Emotion engages attention, and attention strengthens memory. That's why a short, meaningful moment filled with real emotion can outweigh hours of logical conversation. This doesn't mean being overly dramatic or forcing emotions. In fact, forced emotion has the opposite effect. It feels unnatural and breaks trust. The key is authenticity. When your emotional responses are real and aligned with who you are, they carry weight without effort. Over time, logic fades because it requires active recall. Emotion stays because it becomes part of the experience itself. And that's what she remembers. Not what made sense, but what made her feel something real. A man's identity in a woman's memory is not built from facts. It's built from feelings. You might think she remembers you for what you said, what you achieved, or how you presented yourself, but over time, those details blur. What stays sharp is the emotional pattern she experienced when she was around you. If being with you felt calm, you become the man who brought peace. If it felt exciting, you become the one who sparked energy in her life. If it felt confusing or unstable, that becomes your identity too. Not because of what you intended, but because of what she consistently felt in your presence. This is where many men get it wrong. They try to define themselves through words, telling her who they are, what they believe, what they can offer. But identity isn't something you announce. It's something she experiences. Every interaction, no matter how small, contributes to that image being formed in her mind. When your behavior is aligned, your tone, your actions, your reactions, you create a clear emotional experience. That clarity allows her to associate a specific feeling with you. And once that association is formed, it becomes incredibly hard to change. On the other hand, inconsistency creates confusion. If one moment you're grounded and the next you're insecure or seeking validation, the emotional signal becomes mixed. Instead of a strong identity, you leave behind uncertainty, and uncertainty doesn't stick the same way a clear emotional imprint does. The key is not to perform a certain emotion, but to embody a stable internal state. When you are genuinely centered, your presence naturally creates a consistent feeling. That feeling becomes familiar to her, and familiarity builds memory. In the end, she won't describe you based on your resume or your words. She'll describe you based on how it felt to be around you. And that feeling becomes who you are in her story, long after the details are gone. Most men walk into interactions thinking they need to perform. They rehearse lines, calculate responses, and try to present the best possible version of themselves. On the surface, it might look impressive, but underneath, it creates tension. Because performance is effort-driven, and effort is felt. It makes the moment seem unnatural, like something is being forced rather than experienced. Presence is different. Presence is when you are fully in the moment, not in your head analyzing every move. It's when you're actually listening instead of waiting for your turn to speak. It's when your attention is steady, your energy is calm, and your reactions are real. That kind of presence creates comfort without needing to prove anything. When you're performing, your focus is on yourself, how you sound, how you look, how you're being perceived. But when you're present, your focus shifts outward. You become engaged with her, with the environment, with the conversation as it unfolds naturally. And that shift is powerful because it removes pressure from the interaction. People can sense when someone is truly present. It makes them feel acknowledged, not managed. It makes the moment feel genuine instead of staged. And that authenticity is what creates a deeper connection. You don't need perfect words when your presence already communicates confidence and ease. Performance might get attention, but it rarely builds lasting impact. It's like a temporary highlight, impressive in the moment, but quickly forgotten. Presence, on the other hand, leaves a subtle but lasting impression. It's not loud or flashy, but it stays. The irony is that when you stop trying to perform, you actually come across as more confident. Because real confidence doesn't need to prove itself. It shows in how relaxed you are, how comfortable you are with silence, and how naturally you engage without forcing anything. In the end, it's not about being impressive. It's about being real enough that the moment doesn't feel like an act. It feels like something worth remembering. Most people are used to predictable reactions, polite smiles, expected responses, rehearsed humor, things that feel safe but forgettable. When a man responds in a way that is genuine and unfiltered, it breaks that pattern. And that's exactly what makes a moment stand out. Authentic reactions carry a kind of emotional honesty that can't be replicated or faked, and that's what makes them powerful. When you react authentically, you're not trying to control how you're perceived. You're not adjusting your behavior to fit an image. Instead, you're allowing your real thoughts and emotions to show in a natural way. That could be a genuine laugh that isn't held back, a thoughtful pause before you speak, or even calling something out honestly instead of brushing over it. These small, real moments create depth in an interaction. What makes authenticity so impactful is that it feels rare. In a world where most people filter themselves to be accepted, someone who is real stands out immediately. It creates a sense of trust because there's no hidden agenda behind the reaction. What she sees is what she gets, and that clarity is refreshing. On the other hand, when reactions are calculated, they lose their emotional weight. Even if the words are right, something feels off. It lacks that spark of unpredictability that makes moments memorable. People might respond politely, but they won't feel anything strong enough to remember later. Authentic reactions also create emotional spikes, those unexpected moments where something real happens. Maybe it's a playful tease that comes naturally, or a sincere compliment delivered without hesitation. These moments interrupt the ordinary flow of interaction and create something distinct. Over time, those real, unfiltered reactions become the highlights, she recalls. Not because they were perfect, but because they were genuine. And genuine moments have a way of sticking, long after everything else fades into the background. Attraction might begin with a moment, but memory is built through repetition. One good interaction can create interest, but it's consistency that turns that interest into something lasting. When your behavior, energy, and attitude remain steady over time, it creates a sense of predictability that feels safe and real. And that stability is what allows emotions to deepen and stick. Most men underestimate this. They think a strong first impression is enough. So they show up at their best once, maybe twice, and then slowly shift, becoming less attentive, more uncertain, or overly reactive. That inconsistency doesn't just go unnoticed, it disrupts the emotional experience. It creates confusion, and confusion weakens memory. Consistency, on the other hand, reinforces a clear emotional pattern. If every time she's around you, she feels a similar sense of calm, confidence, or positive energy, that feeling becomes associated with you. It becomes familiar. And familiarity is powerful because it builds trust without needing constant reassurance. This doesn't mean being predictable in a boring way. It means being stable in who you are. Your core behavior doesn't fluctuate based on mood, insecurity, or external pressure. You don't suddenly change your tone, your attention, or your values just because the situation shifts. That kind of steadiness signals emotional strength. When you're inconsistent, it forces her to question what version of you she's going to get. That uncertainty creates distance. But when you're consistent, it removes that doubt. It allows her to relax into the interaction, knowing what your presence feels like. Over time, this repeated emotional experience leaves an imprint. It's no longer just a series of moments. It becomes a pattern that defines how she remembers you. And patterns are far more powerful than isolated events. In the end, it's not the intensity of a single moment that lasts. It's the reliability of how you made her feel, again and again, that stays with her. Most men spend their time trying to impress, trying to say the perfect words, trying to be what they think she wants. But the truth is, what stays with a woman long after you're gone has very little to do with what you showed, and everything to do with what she felt when she was with you. Speech. The biggest mistake most guys make is believing that attraction is built on what they can display: confidence, success, charm, status. And while those things might open the door, they are not what stays in her mind when time passes. What she remembers, what she never forgets, is the emotional experience you created. Think about it. People forget conversations, they forget details, but they never forget how someone made them feel. That's the one thing most men completely overlook. They focus on performance instead of presence. They try to impress instead of connect. And in doing that, they become replaceable. When you're constantly trying to prove yourself, you create pressure. The interaction feels forced, calculated, almost like an audition, and she senses that. But when you're fully present, calm, grounded, and genuinely engaged, you create something rare. You give her an experience where she feels seen, understood, and emotionally safe without even realizing why. It's not about saying the perfect line. It's about the way you listen when she speaks. It's about the pause before you respond, showing that you actually absorbed what she said. It's about your energy being steady, not reactive, not desperate for approval. That kind of presence creates a subtle emotional imprint that sticks. Most guys think being memorable means being impressive, but being unforgettable actually comes from being real. When your reactions are authentic, when your emotions aren't forced, when you're not trying to manipulate the outcome, that's when the connection becomes powerful. There's also something deeper at play: consistency. Anyone can create a good moment once, but when your energy, your behavior, your presence remains steady over time, it builds trust. And trust amplifies emotion. It turns simple interactions into something meaningful, something that lingers. And here's where most men lose it. They break that consistency. One moment they're grounded, the next they're overthinking, chasing validation, changing their behavior out of fear. That shift is felt immediately, and it weakens the emotional memory they were building. The men who leave a lasting mark are not the ones who try the hardest. They are the ones who remain themselves regardless of the situation. They don't overreact. They don't overcompensate. They don't lose their center trying to gain approval. Because at the end of the day, she won't sit there remembering what you wore, what you said word for word, or what you had. She'll remember how she felt in your presence, whether she felt calm or anxious, whether she felt valued or overlooked, whether she felt something real or something temporary. And that feeling, once it's strong enough, doesn't fade easily.